Thank you, Capit Art, for that really nice contribution. Much appreciated. It's always appreciated when all you guys also comment and share, subscribe, and all those things. That's really good for keeping us paid for. And nobody's getting rich here. In fact, nobody's doing anything except getting paid for, and I'm not getting paid anything. So consider that, by the way, when you think about delivering to others. Ang said the study or contemplation of great works of art must only serve to make the study of nature easier, more productive. It should not make one reject it, nature being that from which all perfections emanate and draw their origin. It's in nature that one can find this beauty, which is the great object of painting. It is there that one must look for it, nowhere else. It's also impossible for an idea of beauty to be formed apart from nature, of a beauty superior to that which nature offers, as it is to conceive of a sixth sense. We are obliged to establish all our ideas, even to that of Olympus and its divine inhabitants, on purely earthly objects. The whole great study of art, then, is learning to imitate these objects. Now, I apologize to whoever sent me this quote. You'll know who you are. I feel really, really lame not being able to, once I lose a connection between the name and the comment, it's very hard for me to find it again. And I don't know why, exactly why that is, but it's the case. So my apologies. You know who you are. I'll thank you another day if you send me that information. So that was a really wonderful comment. So here's our friend's proposal. I don't want to call it as much a question, although it is a question. Do you find this to be so? As a question. Let's look at this point. There are many artists who are committed to the look of nature. Chardin, Velázquez, Decamp, Benson, Tarbell, Ang, etc. Yet the look of their paintings are each uniquely different. It seems impossible to truly paint the look of nature without some aspect of our own hand being present. That's an interesting reality that people are that we're forced to face. There seems to be a correlation between the cultivation of our own spirit, and this is the part I like, and he puts it in parenthesis, beauty, and our ability to paint the spirit, the beauty of nature. Kind of in it takes one to know one kind of way. Do you find this to be so? This is going to be a short video, but this is it's a marvelous question. What the proposal that you make here of the correlating specific beauty to our spirit, to our response, is really a hugely right way of thinking. So you wouldn't say it's the beauty of nature in some objectively abstracted way. It's the beauty of nature to you. It's what you see. And as Ang says, you can draw that leg ugly, but I see it beautiful. But I see something. When I see it, it will be beautiful. Well, that would be only if it were true, right? I mean, if you look at some sort of a deformity, can you find beauty in that? And I don't know if that's a rational thing or not, but our ability to paint the beauty of nature, I'm not sure the spirit of nature is what I would think of as the same thing as the beauty of nature. By the way, this video is going to be without images, so if you're inclined to just sit back, close your eyes and listen, or continue driving your car, you won't be left out. But that's an interesting question, though, whether the spirit of nature, nature is full, as Ang would say, it is the embodiment of these beauties. But there's a different question. That is, there's a conversation about the cultivation of your ability to see them, right? In other words, when you're looking at nature, do you look at it in such a way that you wonder where the beauty is? And do you gravitate towards something and then try to discover that, try to draw forth what it is? But even to understand what that beauty is in front of you. But But the first thing you put out there, the quote from Ang, the study or contemplation of the great works of art. This is where you can't get too much Ang. And of course, as a guy, as a teacher himself, and he was having to formulate. He was having to formulate. Well, we all do a philosophy on the nature of painting, on the nature of our form, and that required the separation of just simply the truth of the world in front of you and beauty itself, whatever that is. But he managed to get himself to the point of the beauty-truth consortium, complex, what's the better word for that? So the study or contemplation of great works of art must only serve to make the study of nature easier and more productive. Now that's an interesting thing, because the study of the contemplation of great works of art, it must do that, but must only serve to do that. It's an interesting thing, because they are the source of, they are in themselves as paintings, as objects. They become our source material for our own concepts of what art is. In other words, the fact that we were drawn to these things is something. But it seems like Ang is actually saying that's something specific to art itself. But it seems like what Ang is possibly saying here is that, don't you see, and that the world is, that it's the beauty in the world that has made the art in the first place, that has caused men to be satisfied. Yes, there, and now I've done that thing, whatever that thing is. But there's something, but that's something they've learned by their contemplation of nature itself. What Yogi Berra said, if you keep watching, you might observe something. I love that. I know why I ran into some Yogi Berra quotes this week. Yogi Berra was a Yankees catcher for those many years when they were winning all those big championships, and he was for a very long time, till Johnny Bench, was the biggest home run hitter from behind the plate, the catcher position. For those people who know American baseball, so apologies to the rest. But he had this crazy way of saying things, many of which you'll find yourself saying once you've ever heard them. I think he might have been the author of "It Ain't Over Till the Fat Lady Sings," but things like that. One I heard recently was, I didn't get my kid an encyclopedia. I mean, because why can't they walk to school like I did? So he has this wonderful way of laughing at himself, putting on dumb, and to whatever extent it is, he's still got a witty way with words. I mean, I don't know how smart he is, but actually, they say that the behind the plate requires the most intelligence of all the positions in sports, in basketball. I'm sorry, in baseball. So for whatever that's worth, why am I saying all that? So the study or contemplation of great works of art must only serve to make the study of nature easier, more productive. It should not make one reject it. It should not make one reject it. So we're not saying about nature, oh, that's nature, this is art. He's saying, don't you see, this is where it all comes from. And I think at another point he said, don't kick your mother in the stomach. It's fascinating, that conversation that goes on. And there is a sort of a classic appearance of a classic rejection of that in the modernist world, in the modernist frame from the turn of the last century forward. There was a sense of kicking your mother in the stomach. If you haven't read it, I think you all would be in for an interesting, amusing ride if you would read Tom Wolfe, who was a social commentator, Tom Wolfe's book called The Painted Word. One I would just recommend for your amusement. He's just a social observer. Tom Wolfe is. This is not the great Thomas Wolfe, but Tom Wolfe, the American of recent times. Okay. All right. It should not make one reject it, nature being that from which all perfections emanate and draw their origin. And I've talked a bit before about the beauty of certain flowers and just the way they're formed, just the form of them and the patterns involved and the beauty of their color movements and just no end of possible things. You can see how we only have, if we had a blank world, we wouldn't be coming up with anything. But nature has provided us with things and we want to emulate them. And you could say it might be the same as, in the oral world. and we hear birds chirping, and maybe that's what tells us there's such a thing as abstract music. That's a music per music. But even in the world of nature, the colors on flowers aren't beautiful because of the flower. You see what I mean? It's not because flower. It's because beauty. It's because color relation. It's because form and form relations, line and so on. Those are the things that drive the beauty, that are the beauty. It's not that it's a flower that makes it beautiful. It's one of those things that I've said before, I had to stop myself from painting Chinese vases. They're so beautiful. You just put one up there and all you have to do is paint this thing and you have a piece of art. It's not so. You have a different job. That's an interesting thing because your different job is a rectangle. And what happens throughout the entire rectangle is your job, not which object you painted inside it and how pretty that was. That's one of those places where I'm inclined to differ a little bit from the Greeks and wonder about whether that model of the perfect figure, is important. I think you got to be careful how you use those sorts of things. So, but then the next line is, this is still Ang talking. It's in nature that one can find this beauty, which is the great object of painting. So this beauty is the great object of painting. So it's a discovered beauty, but it's the very idea of beauty. And then there's that part that our friend here, and I do sincerely apologize. I'd love to be saying your name each time, and thank you for this. But he then separates as the beauty of nature and the beauty of our perceptions, or our perceptions of beauty versus nature's own content. But there's a question of that in that way is there any content without the human eye and human consciousness and that sort of thing? Is the content, whatever content there is, would it be relevant? And so on. In fact, one of the things that's to be aware of is that nature is full of chaos. It's like a field that's, you can put some corn in this field, but it's not going to do very well. You really need to do some farming. You need to clear the field and get the weeds not to grow, and finally, and figure out ways to focus the energy. But I talked to a farmer not so long ago, and he said, I know of 108 plants in my field out there. I think he said 108. Forgive me, Mark, if that was the wrong number. But all of which are edible. So any one of which could have been caused to take over the entire field. A field alfalfa if you're raising an animal, a certain kind of animal, or of a corn or a wheat or of many other things. But there's so many like that. Dill. You all know. So nature has those, but there's a requirement that we create a garden, right? Garden of Eden model, so to speak, if you want to say it that way. Yeah. So it's all wonderful, but when we start putting it in a rectangle, the game, now we become the author of beauty. That is, say, what's happening now in a rectangle has this, shall we say, the necessity of at least reaching toward that special thing that nature provides, that nature speaks out to us, even though in bits and pieces here and there. One of the reasons I think we respond so nicely to a sunset is because it's so big, it takes over the entire frame, of our world, so to speak. It dominates. You watch the movement of color and light, this way and that. Of course, if you turn around, it's not the same world, is it? What am I saying? So it's in nature that one can find this beauty, which is the great object of painting. It's there that one must look for it and nowhere else. So this is la source, right? The famous la source. It's also impossible for an idea of beauty to be formed apart from nature. That's what I was fundamentally saying. We don't have anything. Humans aren't originators. We are imitators. We are extenders. We are numbers of other things. But we don't create things from nothing. We develop things. In fact, one of the things about painting is that your job in front of a painting is to let it evolve, to let it find its unity. We don't have this creative thing that just makes creative unity. It does pay for us to begin, say, there is such a thing as finding the nature of unity, why things hang together. It's important to do that so you can take a thing that's pretty good and really bring it home and really make it a fine piece of unity. But it's impossible for an idea of beauty to be formed apart from nature, of a beauty superior to that which nature offers. It's to conceive of a sixth sense. We're obliged to establish all our ideas, even to that of Olympus and its divine inhabitants. All we have is humans to look at. You ever wondered why the aliens are always sort of look like us? They got fingers, they got eyes, big ones. It's just some sort of a deformity of who we are. But it's a fascinating question of what the rest of the world otherwise might be. Well, we've got to, when we start talking about things we don't know, we've got to use our own data to generate it so we can generate monsters and aliens. All right, so the whole great study of art then is learning to imitate these objects. So this is what I really would bring to you, and that is make it an objective of yours to study nature. If you keep watching, you might observe something. You might even be able to come to the source of beauty. And I don't mean to the source in the sense that we know it's nature makes, but into the very nature of beauty itself, that thing which has its origins in front of us. So that's why, I say to students, don't just paint whatever. If you're not responding to it, why are you even there, right? That's not necessarily beauty, that whatever thing. But it doesn't mean a guy like Sargent couldn't sit down and just look around, and before you know it, there's the spot. He's found it, that unit that has that quality that he's responding to and saying, I can do, there it is right there. And so it's not just whatever we pick up. Everything isn't equal in this world. You will learn to discriminate. And that's where the question of taste that somebody else brought into this field recently really does come in. And who was it? Again, somebody online, one of you guys talked about Arthur Hammond, a photographer, and a book on composition. And I think he's right about a lot of things. And there's much of what he says is right in line with what the great thoughts of painting are. And he comes from an era that had a lot of good painters around, so he wasn't going to be able to say what he said in a vacuum. But his conversation about, the one thing I find in most conversations about the image, about something in a frame, is there seems to be a lack of a discussion about the very nature of unity and why this is unified and that's not unified. Right, the variety thing we get, the fact that we like it and respond to it, and it feels good, and it sort of goes right here. But that's why I say the real gift you want to give to yourself is the gift of being able to take something that is essentially beautiful and resolve it. In other words, having grasped that, what the main line is, seeing the need then to weaken another line that's out of unity with that. But you see how that's a false unity then at that point. But it's your unity, it's the unity of the rectangle. And anytime you're painting a landscape, that is a possibility, as one of you guys way back when said to me. And I sort of always laugh at you. Find a great spot. Rather than thinking about what to get rid of, find a great spot. And you won't be thinking so hard about what to get rid of. But you'll probably will wind up moving, adjusting, whatever. So let's go on to your actual questions. And let's just read it through again and see if I can just respond a little bit. So there are many artists who were committed to the look of nature: Chardin, Velázquez, Duchamp, Benson, Tarbell. Yet their paintings are each uniquely different. And that is really true. And of course, you're right in saying that's because, he says it seems impossible, or she, to truly paint the look of nature without some aspect of our own hand being present. Yeah, even the choice of what you're going to paint or what specific little area and how you're going to narrow it down to this. All those things are decisions that will be nuanced by your background, the ways that you've raised yourself. Some people say the way you've cultivated your taste, but that's not quite a big enough thing, but it's a factor in all this. There seems to be a correlation between the cultivation of our own spirit and that's the question, again, about the evolution of taste. And I think, as I said, I think that's something that Hammond says. that one can do. One can actually work on that. Well, I think we can, and I know that for sure one of the ways to do it is to look at the masters, to keep on looking at them. I recommended at one point, and did it myself, collecting postcards of the pictures I really liked when I went through a museum. And before I do it, I had a stack of like 20, 30, up to 60 cards. And I began, from that point forward, bringing in new ones that I found in a new museum and getting rid of some of the old ones. And I was surprised that my taste was changing. I was actually becoming a better judge. So some I was very pleased to eliminate out of this part of the deck as I brought this new one in. And so that's what I think of as the potential for the evolution. Somebody said once, I've said it to you guys, I think before, that Hunter, he says you can't teach taste. But the fact is you can make a person, you may not make them all equal in taste, but if a person tastes enough wines, they're going to be a much better judge of wine quality. Of course, all of this stuff, wine quality, is based on personal judgments in any case, and it's the common thread the things that we all agree on. You know what I mean? Oddly enough, almost a democratic model that winds up being that thing we call good judgment. Is the things that. How can you say that? This one has that thing of this or that part of that. How can you say that's? But if you just tasted 3 wines or 1 wine in your life and you taste another one, even just this to this, you might be able to judge a little bit. By the time you've tasted 20 wines, and by the time you actually know that some of these things burned your stomach or did, whatever else apart from you being ill or something like that, some of them didn't sit well with you. And sort of routinely didn't, and certain types even mightn't be. Before you know it, you're developing what we call taste. So the cultivation of your own spirit, if that's what you mean, and you say your own spirit beauty, well, I do like, though, to get right to this point, though, that I see in here, the thing worth really holding, and that is that we are the vessels. Is that really the right word? We're the interpreters of the thing in front of us. It is that thing in us that draws forth or responds, and we are on a canvas. And you might even say in almost a scientific way, we're trying to put that out there and see if we can see it. Can I get that to happen on here? What is it that I'm responding to? So another person can say, wow, yes, I've seen it like that, and not just I've seen it like that, but thank you for doing that. You've sort of made it permanent. By expressing an idea, it becomes available to everybody. And so in that way, there's a kind of an interesting value in painting itself and the exploring of the very stuff that makes a thing appeal to us. I'm wandering around here, but it's a very interesting subject. I'm very pleased that you sent this out to me. What's your name? You're not anonymous, but anyway, but the spirit, the beauty of nature, the beauty that's in nature is not. Nature is full of stuff, right? Some days the dog bites you, and you're not going to call that the beauty of nature. I don't know what else you can call it, something else, and maybe in a grander construct of something, a lesson you learn, it would be. But you see that the lesson you learned has to attach to that for it to be beautiful, had a beautiful experience. But so it's not. Yeah, so it does take your kind of an experience, and it does take the cultivation of your own spirit, and that's where I think you may be leading us, and that is to the idea of the good, the beautiful, the true, in a sort of a classic sense of something that always hangs around these things, and what gives value to a painting, to a piece of poetry. What is that? But the expression of the reinforcement of these things that mean so much to us and are so healthy for our world, for our existence, for our relationships with each other. So I'm going into the preaching mode now. I guess we're done. But thank you for that, and I apologize for losing your name in the course of putting this out. Mr. Producer had me do 2 of these, and so this is either 1 of 2 or 2 of 2, which is, I'm sort of purposely wearing the same shirt, but not with the same jacket on it. But these are 2 talkies, didn't have time to really run images out and things like that. And it isn't really necessarily appropriate. So, but I hope you enjoyed the 2 bits of chatter, and we'll see you next week. Oh, don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, like, all the favorite things. Don't forget to do that for us. It's much appreciated. All right. Thank you.